Buddy, I am very happy to be here with you today because, yes, as Hilda said, I feel to be the mother or the grandmother of these gender issues in transport. Well, when I met these ladies the first time, it was about 15 years ago. I was a project officer in DG Research dealing with transport, and we were fighting to have the first gender impact reports on the framework program. And I was personally carrying out my fight against the approach we had to gender at that time. I was extremely annoyed by the head counting issues. How many women in the projects, how many project coordinators, how many women are researchers, and just the numbers. And I was really fed up because I said, okay, numbers is important, is part of the data that we have to collect, but what the hell are they doing in the projects? What is the role of women? What are they doing? What are their capacities? What are their roles? And then we were trying to have it in our little domain. I mean, I was with my colleague Luisa Prista, that was my head of unit at that time. We were carrying out our own personal fights against all this. And then we discovered, then in the social science program, there was a project that was called Transgen. I was a little bit allergic to this gendered work on the social science because I said, okay, that's fine. We have this overall assessment of gendered issues, gender problem, but then what the hell? What can we do practically on our specific fields? Then I said, transgen, haha, these ladies are working on transport. Let's have a look. And then I discovered that in fact they were really focusing on a specific technological and technical field, I mean on a specific field that had a specific policy, and I said, well, this might be interesting. So, and then we had a look to this, we had a closer contact with the project that they were carrying out, and the first thing we discovered is that there was a strong trials to bridge the gap between science, policy making, and implementation of technologies. And I said, well, these ladies are interesting. No? And then getting further to understand the issues that were in the report, we discovered that there was a lot of very interesting aspects. And I'm not ashamed to say today that at that time nobody really got the full content, the full meaning of this report. In this report there was for the first time the underlining the need for intersectional research. The world is not binary. The world is not made by men and women, but men and women have their own specific characteristics, and sometimes these characteristics are even more important than gender in identifying needs and equalities or differences. So, and then the other point is that this report hinted to the importance of fostering and increasing the presence of active women in the transport sector as workers, as professionals, not only as users. It's very sad to say that that was written down in 2007, and still today we are fighting for these things. I mean, only 2-3 years ago the European Commission launched the platform for changes that is really supporting a higher presence of women in the transport sector as workers, as professionals. That has been done 10 years after. And we are still fighting and having really sometimes we feel a little bit hopeless in trying to really have an implementation of policies, a real mainstreaming in this field. I mean, we still have to see that transport is still very less than before, but still quite heavily man-dominated as a sector. And why? And so there are a lot of stereotypes, and already this transgen report was asking to overcome these stereotypes, to give different models, to give different presences. And the work has going on. I mean, also Tano in the other book was really revising the concept of mobilities. I mean, that is not only the mobility is not only moving from A to B. Mobility is a social activity. Our social relations is the social role a person has in the society. And mobility is not compulsory. I think it is important that we also have to consider the choice of not being mobile. And I think that the present situation of today, with this paranoia of the coronavirus around the world and the need to stop contacts and connections and try not to shake hands and all these things, is really pushing us to reflect again on what we are doing and what we want, where do we want to go. That's okay. Coming back to the question of mobility, I think that we are looking at quite important steps in the conception of transport. When I started working in the transport program, transport was mainly engineering of transport means. I remember when I joined the unit, I was the only woman together with my head of unit, and that was a unit made of all men. And with Luisa we were saying, oh, they are so happy to play with the little train, electric trains and little cars, because that is really a boy game. It's a boy things. And they used to call the secretaries the girls. Where are the girls? And then we started talking with Luisa, where are the boys? So there was really some sort of friction, but that was really a concept that was really very, very like the picture you showed before. I mean, the man in the car, and as an extension of his own masculinity. But slowly things are changing. So from transport we are starting talking about mobility, so that the means are means. I mean, the real issue is that transport is useful and needed to perform some other activities. You don't move just for the sake of moving. So that was quite important to revise these things. And then still, and I saw that, the research programs and the policy in the Commission have been changing a lot over time, and we are more and more talking about the system of mobility. And now we have another leap, and that is the smart mobility. But where is the gender in all that? In mobility still we haven't really considered very much the gendered aspects. And the gender aspect is not a question of considering gender aspect, it's really having a different view and having a joint view of men and women on the content, on the subject, because there are different understanding, different needs, different perceptions, and that is very important. We noticed, in the TRB Congress in Irvine, in California, last September. There was a session looking at what happened in the last 30 years around the world, and taking aside a little bit Asia, and with the differences in Asia and the other Australian continents, let's say Africa and South America, that were not represented, we noticed that both in the US and in Europe, the difference gap between patterns of women and men is closing. And you say, why? You think that from one side, women are taking a different role in society, so they are having a different mobility needs. They are more employed, so they have a different role in the work situation, so they are not only recluded in the families, family carers, but they are participating in other activities, social activities. But also the sustainability consciousness is moving men towards women stereotypical patterns. So there is a consciousness, there is a different way of looking at things. So it is important to consider that because things are changing. So, and also the gender roles and stereotypes are changing slightly. So they are approaching from one side to the other. Still there is a difference, still there is an exclusion in decision making. That is the most important thing. But this smart mobility, I think, is putting us a number of questions in front. First of all, is the revising some values. I mean, as I said, mobility or immobility, the choice, I mean, to be mobile and how. And then there is another thing that I always tried to push, and that was always a little bit against the general policy things. The interest of being fast, the concept of speed, against the value of time. So what is the value of time in general? What is the need to move from A to B as quick as possible? And what do you do in the time you saved in this transfer? That is quite important, I think, and the smartness of mobility should also consider that. The smartness of mobility also is pushing us to consider the role of technology. And technology has always been considered as gender neutral. It is not. It is absolutely not. Because the application of technologies could be extremely varied, and they can have a completely different impact. And I think it is extremely important today that women will have their say in how these technologies and these new systems are implemented and applied. These technologies are also giving us the possibility not to make a progress in some traditional way of approaching mobility. These things can really present us and give us the possibility to drive the change, to change completely the perspective, to change the landscape, to change the concept of transport and mobility. And that is a completely new field, and it is not yet male-dominated. So please help us in having women taking their role and taking their position, because they have a very important role to play in this change. So I think that is the invitation I give you all, and I hope that this book is also contributing a lot to having this change of perspective.